Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Lefebvre, and today we are going to be painting the most beautiful plant I've ever seen. It's called the Stromanthe Triostar plant, and I saw it at a greenhouse and I was just in love. It has two of my favorite colors, green and pink, so I just thought I had to paint it, and today we're painting it with gouache, so let's jump right in and start. Okay, so to start, I'm just going to go through my supplies. I am going to be painting in my Etchr Lab hot press sketchbook, and it's smoother paper, so the gouache glides on it really nicely. That's why I'm using hot pressed. I am using painter's tape from the dollar store just to tape around a border, and then my Hemi gouache set. So the first thing I did was sketch out the Stromantha Triostar leaves, and I'm only doing a couple, so I'm not doing like the full plant, but I'm just gonna focus on a couple leaves, and they're just long leaves. So I sketched them out with my pencil. I also have a kneaded eraser, which I highly suggest using. I just love them and they erase really nicely. And then the next thing I did was get my paints out and start painting. So these plants have an incredible color, from this really light peachy pink to kind of like a sage bluish green, and then a really nice dark green. So I started by mixing the pink that was in my palette and the lightest yellow with a bunch of white. And when you're painting with gouache, what you have to remember is that it dries darker than the color that you've mixed. So I always tend to forget that. So I ended up using a lot more white in the end, but I just tried to mix the perfect peachy pink using those three colors. See there, I added a lot more white. And I just started outlining parts of the leaf. So for this painting, I highly suggest you look at a reference photo because every leaf's different. And the great thing is that you don't have to do each leaf the same. They all kind of have a different pattern of pinks and greens mixed on the leaf. So really, you could do it any combination. You can have one that's mostly pink or mostly green. For this, I did look at a reference photo that I took when I was at the greenhouse. So I just kind of had an idea where I wanted to place the pinks and the greens. And I started off with a light hue of the pink. Then you'll see later that I'll make a darker one just to get a bit of shadow in that too. And like I think I've said before with gouache, to make something really stand out, it's nice to do layers of lighter and darker values of the color. It just kind of makes it pop a bit more because gouache is such a flat, matte medium when it dries. The more detail you have with different shades and, shadows and highlights, I feel like the more it pops. So just placing the pink down, and I decided to do the pink first because it's a lighter color, because if I put the green down first and it accidentally mixed with the pink, I don't know, there's probably more of a chance that it would have been a muddier color. One other thing I want to mention that you need to keep in mind when painting with gouache is that if you are going to be doing layers, you want to make sure that that base layer is not too thick, because when you do go over it, because it's reactivated with water, if you're doing another layer on top and you're adding kind of that wet pigment, there's more of a chance that you're going to pick up pigment underneath as well. So you'll kind of see with this leaf that I'm doing now, that when I try and go darker later, it starts to pick up some of that lighter pigment from underneath, because I think that I layered it on a little bit too thick. Gouache is still something that I'm trying to learn and figure out myself. But that's just something to keep in mind. So for this color, I added a bit of blue and a little bit of green and a lot of white. And then to make it a bit darker, again, I added some of that blue, some of that green. And then you see that I dipped my brush kind of in that pink, and that just mutes it a bit because I found the green was a bit too vibrant and it didn't look as natural. It looked a little bit more fake. So if you ever want to neutralize a color, add its contrasting color. So pink or red is green's contrasting color, and that's how you decide what color to add. So next I started to mix my darker green color, and I took that kind of darkish green turquoise color and then some purple and then some darker blue and then some lighter green and some lighter blue. I was just trying to mix a bunch of colors until I got the color I liked. Just mixing greens and blues and purples, and it ended up with a pretty nice green, probably one of my favorite colors of green, and I decided to go over the whole rest of the leaf that I've missed with that darker color, and then my plan was to go and create some more highlight and depth with the lighter green on top, because with gouache it is opaque and you can layer light on dark. So that was kind of the plan, and I just tried my best to keep it nice and smooth, not as thick, even though I still think it might have been too thick. I'm trying to figure out the fine line of too much water and too much paint. Gouache is definitely a learning curve for, especially a watercolor artist, where I've kind of mastered the paint to water ratio with watercolor. The paint to water ratio with gouache is kind of stumping me a little bit, and it's completely different. So still getting used to that, but I think this turned out pretty well. And you'll just see that I fill in all of those white areas on the leaves with the dark green. And like I said, when you're layering, a good idea is to try and wait until it's completely dry, which you'll see on that light green leaf. I don't think it was also too thick at the bottom layer, but I also think I should have waited a little bit longer to let it dry, but I'm very impatient when I work, so I didn't let it dry. And I'll show you what it kind of did. It picked up some of that pigment underneath when I was layering it on top. So you'll kind of see right here, the more I move my brush over that darker green area that I'm trying to make, you're starting to see a little bit of that lighter pigment peek through a bit. It's starting to mix with the dark green, and it's not as lighter as the dark green on the leaves with the pink. And I kept trying to go over it, but it wasn't working as well as I liked, but that's okay. Learning, and it doesn't all have to be perfect or the same by any means. So then you'll see I took that light green again, and I'm just starting to do the highlights on the dark green parts of the leaf. Again, it's a little hard on that green, like pure green leaf, because it was still pretty wet. But yeah, just did the vein going down the middle, and then just used my brush to kind of flick out these lighter green areas. Oh, and by the way, I'm using my Princeton snap brush for this. Usually I use my Princeton Select brushes, but I didn't. I used my Princeton Snap, and it works fine. And then I tried to mix this olive green. So I took that kind of bright green that was in the palette, mixed it with that magenta color to make this nice medium olive green tone, which ended up being such a beautiful color. I think my favorite part of this piece is just the color palette. The pinks and the greens are awesome. So I just started plopping that mid-tone green in different places, kind of used the reference photo to have an idea of where to put them, but didn't use it exactly. And, just had fun and played with it. So then came time for the background, and I chose this like kind of yellow ochre, mustard yellowy color. And I put it down, and I wasn't too fond of it on its own. It just didn't seem to go as well as I wanted to. I feel like I should have actually picked the color palette beforehand and thought about it a little bit more before I just put down any color. But then you'll see I take some of this kind of, I want to say it's like a brick red kind of color, and I decided to put that over top, and it created this nice kind of like orangey brown background that I ended up really liking. And it also goes kind of with the theme of my bedroom, all of these colors, and it just looks pretty nice. So because I started off with that yellow color underneath, I ended up just doing a layer of yellow on every part of the background first, and then put that brown color on top just to make sure it was, consistent all through the background. And I'm also still trying to figure out how to make the background look kind of flat and matte together, because sometimes I can see, some brush strokes, and I don't know if I'm actually fond of that look. I mean, it looks okay, but I feel like when I look at some other gouache artists, their backgrounds are like just impeccable, and like I don't know if they're just using a lot more paint or they're thinning out their paint with water and it's just very consistent. I don't know. Either way, it turned out nice, and I just used my Princeton Select angle brush to do the background so I can get around those sharp edges, and it's a pretty decent size to lay it down, and that was about it. So then I got to do my favorite part, which is taking off the painter's tape, and I got to see the finished painting, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. Thank you all so much for watching my video. I really hope you liked it and I hope you learned something. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and follow me on Instagram for even more. Have a great day, guys. Bye!